Hi, welcome to the food safety class at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. My name is Kerry McMillen. I am the nutrition manager here, and this class will be presented in two parts. I will be presenting the food safety portion, and then Paula Macris will be presenting on the immunosuppressed diet. So first, let's start off with reviewing who actually follows the food safety guidelines and the immune-suppressed diet. If you are getting an allogeneic transplant, meaning you're getting your stem cells from someone else, you'll want to follow this diet until you're off all immunosuppressive medications and feeling well. If you're an autologous transplant patient, meaning you're getting your own stem cells back, you would follow this diet for 3 months post-transplant. For example, if you got your transplant on October 1st, you would want to follow this diet until January 1st. For any cellular immunotherapy or general oncology patient, the guideline is that you should follow this diet anytime your absolute neutrophil count, or ANC, is less than 1,000. So let's jump into food safety. There are 4 simple steps that we're going to outline, and I will go into each one in more detail. The main steps are clean, washing hands and sanitizing surfaces often, making sure we separate foods to avoid cross-contamination. The third step is we want to focus on cooking foods to the proper temperature. And the fourth step is to make sure that we chill so that we promptly refrigerate foods less than 40 degrees. So let's break this down. Step 1, clean. What we know is that 50% of foodborne illnesses could be eliminated with proper hand washing. So it's very important to focus on washing your hands and also sanitizing surfaces often. We want to wash our hands before any food preparation, certainly after touching any raw meat, using the restroom, changing diapers, handling garbage bags, or touching pets. It's important to think about how to wash your hands appropriately. Basically, you want to wash your hands with warm, soapy water for about 20 seconds, about as long as it takes to sing the ABCs. Friction is important, so you do want to use a scrubbing motion. And remember to make sure you get easily missed spots like fingernails and between the fingers. And also, we want you to dry your hands with a clean paper towel or single-use cloth. And that's to make sure that we aren't transferring germs from a dish towel the next time you wash your hands. So it's important that you do use that paper towel or single-use towel in your kitchen, like a dish towel.
When washing your hands, wash with warm soapy water for 20 seconds. Use friction and remember to get easily missed spots such as your fingernails. When finished washing, dry your hands with a paper towel or a single-use cloth.
In terms of surfaces, we do want you to wash surfaces daily. So washing is always going to mean warm soapy water, and that applies to things like cutting boards, dishes, utensils, countertops, etc. that touch ready-to-eat foods. These would be things like fruits, vegetables, bread, or items that don't need to be cooked. We also want to make sure that before you use a canned good, that you're washing the surface of the canned good before opening. Sanitizing is when bleach is involved to actually disinfect something. So we do recommend that you disinfect many things that come into contact with raw meat or other things that could make you get a foodborne illness. So there is a difference between washing and disinfecting. Keep in mind, washing is using soap, disinfecting is using bleach. Listed here is a homemade disinfecting solution that you can make yourself. The important thing is you do want to change this solution daily, and that's because bleach loses its potency as it's exposed to air, so we want to make sure that it's actually going to work. It's important also that you label this in a covered container just to make sure it's not misused. If you decide to not make a homemade disinfecting solution, which is fine, and you choose to do a commercial disinfecting solution, please just check the label to make sure that it contains bleach. Many germs will not be killed unless they come in contact with actual bleach. I should say also that this disinfecting solution is strong enough to kill germs, but is not harmful to your skin, nor would it be harmful to any food if it happened to get on it by mistake. So when would we want to disinfect? Certainly after each use, when a cutting board, utensil, countertop, etc., touches raw meat. So that would be any type of chicken, beef, fish, etc., that is not cooked. We do want to be on a weekly disinfecting routine where things that, even if they're ready to use items like cutting boards that you're just using for fruit, or dishes that don't come in contact with raw meat like serving bowls, it's important that you do disinfect these items weekly just to make sure that they're not harboring any bacteria. And keep in mind, you do want to clean your refrigerator, inside and out with the bleach solution, and that can just be wiping it down. This is because sometimes, even though we keep a really clean refrigerator, there can be little drips or spills that we want to make sure we get rid of. The other thing to think about disinfecting is to make sure we definitely disinfect our sponge or any dishcloth we're using on a daily basis. The way to do this is really, there's three options. You can either soak it in a bleach solution for 5 minutes, or you can dampen and heat for 1 minute in the microwave, or you can run your sponge through the dishwasher on a hot or sanitized cycle. This will make sure that there's no bacteria or germs in any way living on your sponge. In terms of cutting boards, basically there's no right type of cutting boards. People often ask, should I do wood or plastic or glass? The main thing is you want to have a cutting board that is not overly cracked or scored, and that's because the drippings of meat or fish can get in those little cracks and make it hard to clean. One thing we recommend is considering having 2 cutting boards available, one that you exclusively use for raw meat that you would then disinfect after each use, and one for ready-to-eat foods that you would wash after each use but disinfect only weekly. To disinfect a cutting board, what you would want to do is flood with that bleach solution, meaning you actually submerge it in the bleach solution, or run it through the dishwasher on a hot or sanitized cycle. So either wood or plastic cutting boards are acceptable, or glass if you happen to have that available.
Avoid using cutting boards that are cracked or scored. Consider having 2 cutting boards, one for raw meats that you will disinfect after each use, and one for ready-to-eat foods.
Step 2 is separate. And the main reason we want to do this is to avoid cross-contamination. And that's the method by which bacteria spread from one food to another. So as I mentioned previously, raw foods would be things like beef, pork, lamb, game, poultry, seafoods, and eggs that you would need to cook. Ready-to-eat foods would be your fruits, vegetables, bread, nuts, etc. So let's think about some ideas of how you can separate raw meat from other items. When you're shopping, it's a good idea to put meat in a separate bag. That way, if there's any drips or spills, it's away from other ready-to-eat foods like your produce. When you transport raw meat, it's a good idea to avoid using the reusable bags, just again in case there's a drip or a spill, unless you're actually sanitizing between grocery trips.
Sanitize reusable bags that have been used to carry raw meat, fish, or eggs before each use.
Other ideas would be, as this picture displays, store raw meat on the bottom shelf of the refrigerator. Again, the reason for this is if you notice that there's drips or spills, it's contained and not going over your fresh produce. When you're cooking, it's important to use separate plates for raw and cooked meats. And it's also important not to reuse marinades used on raw foods unless you bring them to a boil first. Let's go over step 3, cooking. It's very important that we cook foods to proper temperatures to make sure that we kill any bacteria. It's also very important to use a food thermometer to measure the temperature of cooked foods, especially meat. It's very hard to tell just with your eyesight if food is cooked to the right temperature. So we really want to make sure that you are all comfortable using a food thermometer and you follow the packaging instructions for proper use. When you do check the temperature, you want to check it in several places to make sure the food is cooked throughout and that it meets the minimum internal temperature. Usually it's a good idea to check at the thickest portion of the meat. The USDA and FDA have recommended safe minimum internal temperatures listed here. You can see that there are differences per type of meat you're eating, and so it's important to familiarize yourself with this list just to make sure that you're cooking things appropriately to the right temperature. Step 4 is to chill. And by this we mean we want to promptly refrigerate foods. So it's important to think about if you have food that you've cooked, you want to refrigerate that to 40 degrees or below within 2 hours. One way to help accomplish this is if you have a large amount of leftovers in a big pot, divide it into shallow containers and chill uncovered on the top shelf of the refrigerator. This allows heat to escape and for it to cool rapidly. Then you can cover it and you can chill foods to 40 degrees. If you want to freeze food, you still want to chill them first before freezing. It's important to think about your refrigerator, and especially if you're staying somewhere that's not your home, just be sure that your temperature is consistent and that your refrigerator temperature is consistently below 40 degrees. And your freezer is at 0 degrees or below. The reason for this is we call it a danger zone, and that's between 40 degrees and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is where bacteria can multiply. So it's really important that foods are properly cooked to the right temperature and also chilled at the right temperature.
From a large pot, place leftovers into a shallow container and place in the top shelf of the refrigerator until it's cooled to 40 degrees. Once it's cooled, covered with a lid to store your leftovers or put them in the freezer.
A few other important tips are that your refrigerator does have to have air circulation in order to cool properly. So just make sure that you're not packing the refrigerator so tightly that air can't circulate. The other thing we want just for food safety is thinking about how to marinate foods or how to defrost them. So if you're ever doing a marinade, make sure you're marinating in the refrigerator, not on the countertop. And another idea for defrosting is you definitely want to do that on the refrigerator in the bottom shelf, or you can defrost in the microwave, but then you want to cook it right away because you've already started the cooking process by microwaving. Or you can also defrost by running it under cold running water. And again, you want to cook immediately because that actually does start the cooking process as well. In terms of leftovers, the guideline is that you want to discard your leftovers within 4 days after preparation. A leftover is defined as anything that you've made or bring home from a restaurant. Leftovers are not things like blocks of cheese or cans of mustard or things like this. It really applies to cooked food. And so you'll want to eat your leftovers within 4 days. If you find that you're just not going to get to it, you can freeze them to extend use. But really the bottom line is that when in doubt, throw it out. Please don't have any science experiments growing in your refrigerator. And if you can't remember how long it's been in there, please don't use that food as a leftover during your transplant course. Now Paula will talk about the immune suppressed diet.
Hello, I'm Paula Macris, registered dietitian at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, and today I'll be talking about the immunosuppressed patient diet. We'll be looking at each of the different food groups and foods that are allowed and foods to hold off on or avoid. The key word for the dairy foods is pasteurized. You want to make sure that you're choosing pasteurized milk and milk products, as well as commercially packaged hard and semi-soft cheeses that are pasteurized. Pasteurized yogurt and kefir. With regards to cheeses, you want to make sure that any cheeses that you purchase sliced from the deli are cooked. And then the foods to hold off on in this group include cheeses with molds, such as blue cheese, and any cheeses that contain uncooked vegetables that are not pasteurized after the addition of the vegetables. With the meat and meat substitutes group, choose cooked, commercially packaged, or deli sliced pre-cooked meats, such as cold cuts or hot dogs. You want to make sure that if you're eating tofu, it's also cooked or pasteurized. And then you can also choose pasteurized eggs. If you choose eggs that are not pasteurized, make sure that they're cooked well done until the yolk is cooked firm. You also want to make sure that pre-cooked meats, this would be packaged or deli sliced meats, are cooked to steaming hot or 165 degrees. And in this group, you want to avoid any kind of raw fish, such as sushi.
When cooking eggs, cook them until the yolk and the white are firm. Alternatively, you may use pasteurized eggs. Pasteurized eggs will be labeled very clearly on the package and will have a little P stamped on the egg. Please be careful when you're reading labels. Pasteurized is not the same thing as pasture-raised. For lunch meats, you may buy lunch meats either in pre-packaged or off of the slicer at the deli. Any lunch meats must be heated before they're consumed. The way to do that is to take the lunch meat out of the package, put it on a clean paper towel, and put this in the microwave and heat it until it is steaming. You may consume the lunch meat cold as long as it has been heated first.
With fruits and vegetables, make sure that you're choosing whole fruits and vegetables. Dried herbs and spices are also acceptable, as are the shelf-stable salsa and fruit products. And finally, make sure that any juices are all pasteurized. With the fruits and vegetables, you want to hold off on any kind of fresh refrigerated salsa. This is the salsa that's in the produce section or the refrigerator cases versus the shelf-stable type. Raw sprouts should be avoided, as should be avoided any kind of salads from the deli. And you also want to make sure to avoid any kind of pre-cut fruits and vegetables. For example, if you see melons that are pre-cut with plastic wrap around them, you want to hold off on those and instead choose the whole fruit or the whole melon. And finally, avoiding any kind of non-pasteurized sauerkraut or non-pasteurized kimchi. With regards to washing fruits and vegetables, make sure that you're washing off fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables thoroughly under clean running water. And this would include any fruits or vegetables that need to be peeled, such as bananas, melons, or oranges, or any of the pre-washed bag salad kits. And even though they say pre-washed on the label, still need to make sure that you're washing them. You want to be sure to scrub produce that has a firm or rough skin, foods like cantaloupes or potatoes or avocados. And finally, make sure that you're rinsing the leaves of leafy vegetables thoroughly, such as the bag lettuce or any kind of greens like kale or spinach.
So we do allow raw fruits and vegetables to be consumed as long as they are properly washed in cold running water. For a rougher vegetable like a potato or an avocado, we ask that you use a scrub brush to give it a good scrub. For any fruit that has a peel, like a banana or an orange, we ask that you wash the outside of it before you cut into it. Smaller fruits like grapes and berries, we ask that you put those into a colander and roll them around under the water until they are clean. Leafy greens, including lettuces, should have each leaf individually washed. Bagged lettuce mixes are acceptable. Even if it says it's been washed already, please wash it again, just to be absolutely sure. Anytime that you are inpatient at University of Washington or at Seattle Children's, you will see fresh fruits and vegetables on the menu. Please know that those have been washed according to our guidelines and they are safe to order.
With foods in the nuts and seeds group, you want to make sure that you're choosing shelled roasted nuts or nuts cooked into the foods. And commercially packaged peanut butter or other nut butters are also acceptable. In this group, it's best to avoid any kind of raw nuts or seeds, and this would include any kind of raw flaxseed or chia seeds. You also want to make sure that you have roasted nuts and not raw nuts or nuts in the shell, such as pistachio nuts or the peanuts that you get at a sports event such as a baseball game. And finally, you want to avoid any kind of raw, ready-to-eat bulk foods. However, these would be acceptable if you do plan to cook them before eating.
When choosing nuts and seeds, choose products that are roasted and out of the shell that come in packages, not products that are in the bulk section. If you do have raw nuts or seeds around that you need to use, You may use them as long as you roast them first or if you bake them into something.
For the bread, grains, and cereal products group, all breads and baked goods are acceptable. And you want to make sure when you buy a loaf of bread that it's entirely sealed, and avoid artisan breads where the ends are open and exposed. Cooked grain products and cereals are also acceptable. And in this group, you want to avoid raw grains such as muesli or some granola bars that may contain raw oatmeal or other raw grains. Bread, grain, and desserts that are open to the public, such as the bread cases in the grocery stores, and also avoid ready-to-eat bulk foods unless you will be cooking them before eating.
When choosing bread products, please avoid any artisan bread products that are open to the public, as these may have been touched by other people. It is okay to ask for artisan breads that have been stored behind a countertop. Otherwise, we ask that you choose prepackaged bread products only. If the bread product contains nuts and seeds, these are acceptable as the baking process has essentially roasted the nuts. We do ask that you avoid any raw grain products such as muesli cereals.
Moving on to the fats, all vegetable oils are acceptable. You want to be sure that you refrigerate lard, margarine, and butter. And shelf-stable mayonnaise and salad dressings, including blue cheese salad dressings, are acceptable. In this group, you want to avoid fresh, refrigerated, commercially prepared salad dressings unless they've been made with pasteurized eggs. These are the salad dressings found in the produce section of the grocery store.
When choosing salad dressings, the safest choices are shelf-stable salad dressings that are sold in the middle of the grocery store at room temperature. These do not require refrigeration when they are at the store. Once you get them home and open them, they do need to be stored in their refrigerator. If you prefer refrigerated salad dressings, the type that are sold in the grocery store near the produce section, read the label carefully to ensure that it contains pasteurized eggs. If you have a salad dressing that contains unpasteurized eggs or another cheese that we don't want you to have, such as blue cheese, choose a different option, or better yet, go to something that is shelf-stable.
Entrees and soups are fine, just make sure that they're cooked. And commercially prepared pasteurized miso products are also acceptable. With this group, you want to hold off on any kind of homemade or restaurant-prepared miso products, as well as the self-serve soups at the grocery stores and the restaurants. For beverages, make sure that you're maintaining your single-serve coffee machines, keeping them clean per the manufacturer's instructions. You want to make tea and coffee as well as loose leaf tea with boiling water at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Commercially bottled or canned cold brew coffee is also acceptable. And with this group, you want to hold off on any kind of fermented beverages like kombucha and also sun tea. For the desserts, make sure that you're choosing cream or custard-filled pastries, if they're refrigerated or shelf-stable products. And then most homemade and commercially baked cookies, cakes, pies, and puddings are going to be acceptable. With this group, you want to hold off on any kind of desserts from the self-service areas. All shelf-stable condiments and dry goods are acceptable, as is pasteurized honey. And you want to avoid any kind of raw honey or honey in the comb. With regards to water safety, city or municipal well water is tested daily throughout the day for contaminants, so it is acceptable. If you plan to drink bottled water, make sure it's been treated by reverse osmosis, distillation, or filtered through an absolute 1 micron or smaller filter. And if well water is your source, make sure that it's been boiled for 15 to 20 minutes, and then you can store it in the refrigerator and use it within 48 hours. With regards to water safety, you want to make sure to avoid any kind of water from private or small community wells. And also avoid the portable water filter systems such as Brita or Purr. They are okay if they're used on a safe water supply to improve the water flavor, but using them alone as a filter is to be avoided. Now just a couple words about dining out. When you're in the hospital, the inpatient room service meals always follow the immunosuppressed diet. This is the SCCA Hospital at University of Washington Medical Center, as well as Seattle Children's Hospital. The Red Brick Bistro at the SCCA South Lake Union facility does have the fresh produce in the cafeteria that is washed properly for the bistro prepared salads and sandwiches. The lunch meats, with the exception of the roast beef and salami, are cooked properly. However, be sure to check the label on any kind of mixed dishes, as some may include ingredients not allowed on the immunosuppressed diet. Finally, the SCCA Hospital, University of Washington Medical Center, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and Seattle Children's Hospital cafeterias and restaurants may not follow the SCCA immunosuppressed diet guidelines. So make sure that when you are in the hospital, you're ordering food off of the menu rather than having your caregiver go to the cafeteria and picking up that food for you. If you are dining out, try to go at a time when it's not crowded, like an early lunch or dinner. Go to a place where you can choose cooked food, specifically cooked vegetables, whether they're steamed, baked, or sautés, and baked fruit. You want to hold off on any kind of raw fruits and vegetables, or foods that are open to the public, such as buffets and salad bars. You also want to avoid any kind of food sold by the street food vendors, such as the food trucks and the farmers markets. So some things to remember if you do go out to eat hot foods hot and cold foods cold. Check the color and the juices of the meat. Make sure when you're cutting into red meat that they're cooked well, they're brown, there's no visible pink or red showing. If you need any kind of condiments, ketchup, mustard, request new unopened bottles or individual packets of the condiments. If you have leftovers and need a doggy bag or a box, make sure that you ask the server to bring you the box so that you can pack your own leftovers. If you're unsure about the cleanliness of the restaurant, take a look at the restrooms, make sure that they're nice and clean, that there's soap and paper towel in the dispenser. Chances are that if the manager is keeping the restrooms clean, hopefully they're practicing good hygiene habits throughout the restaurant. You also want to make sure that the tables and the dinnerware are nice and clean and that they're not touching any kind of wet surfaces on the table. And finally, King County, the county here in Seattle, does regular restaurant inspections. And if you're wondering specifically about details about the restaurant you're thinking about going to, check the following website and you can find out a little bit more about the inspections and the ratings. If you plan to have any kind of fast food, make sure that the foods are freshly prepared, ask to have them made fresh. And you want to avoid any kind of raw fruits and vegetables, whether it's lettuce or tomatoes on the burgers or the tacos or the side salads. And also avoid any kind of special sauces. Finally, on the SCCA website, you can go to the website listed here and click on videos to look for the food safety video, as well as many other patient education videos that would be available. If you do have additional questions, reach out to your team dietitian, and they'll be glad to be able to help you with more information.